I thought I'd try something with my comparison videos. They're a bit complicated. They take some time to do. And I have some ideas of doing some other things, but there's enough advice videos already on YouTube and other social media. So I thought I'd do two things. I'm going to start one here. This is what I call Reddit reading. Let's look at some posts about D&D in various Reddit groups, read some comments, give you my thoughts, just see what's going on out there. I recently joined Reddit a couple weeks ago, well, a month or so ago now, and there are some interesting things said and some ridiculous things said. So let's take a look. So this is a fairly new one. This was just posted a half hour ago maybe. And the title of it is Feedback on an Idea. I did read this one already, so it's an interesting concept. It says, I haven't had much time to think this through too much, but I just thought of something. I'm pretty sure that all the spells in D&D could be cut down to like 30 or something core spells. If this happened, they can be further re-specialized with several tags and templates. This would allow for a more cohesive SARI system where spells can interact more thoroughly with other spells without requiring a rework with every new added spell. It might also allow adding receivable spells back without their feature being useless. Bad grammar here. I think there's some few typing errors. I think what he's basically saying is boil it down to the very essentials. So we take all the healing spells and just make one healing spell, right? We don't need cure and then mass cure and then the heal and remove disease. We just need one heal spell. And then you could say, okay, I'm going to cast the heal spell with the remove disease effect. I'm going to use this spell to produce this effect. I'm going to cast a fire spell, and this time I'm going to use it to generate firebolt. Next time I might create a fireball. It's actually an interesting idea. I've toyed around with it a bit myself. I don't think it'll work well in Dungeons and Dragons because of the way the magic system is put out. You'd have to basically rework the entire magic system, which I actually tried doing back in 3.5. I've actually experimented with this idea, trying to get it to work, and it just won't work. You have to basically rewrite the entire game system, which I've actually done. I tried writing my own game system, and it actually worked out fairly well. It's still very much in experimental stages, but this idea, if this is what he's going for, doesn't really work in Dungeons and Dragons, but it is something that I think more people than he realizes have thought of this idea before. And to some extent, they actually did do this for 5th edition, because in earlier editions, you had cure light wounds, cure moderate wounds, cure serious wounds, and cure critical wounds. These were 1st, 2nd, 3rd, and 4th level spells, respectively. And they kind of condensed all that down into just the cure spell. And instead of casting a 1st level spell or a 2nd level spell and having those spells be separate, it's now one spell that you choose to cast at different levels and for increased effect. So to some extent, they actually did this for 5th edition, but I don't think you could do it much more than they already have. And I've explained what I think he means by it, but, maybe I'll come back and visit this later and find out if he clarified himself at all. I just found that to be an interesting concept, something that I have actually looked at before and toyed with and tried to get to work. Now, here's one that I actually kind of understand. This is a much more interesting one. He says here, how to count durations. In general, combat doesn't pay long enough for it to be relevant. I think he meant play, or you lose concentration first. But in the odd circumstance that it does, how do you count durations in the game and combat? Okay, let's say that an effect has a 1-minute duration. That means 10 rounds. Do you count the partial round that it is activated or not? Do you finish it before your turn on round 10 or after your turn or before your turn on round 11? This is a somewhat of a philosophical question. It all comes down to exactly how you picture combat working. Now, combat in D&D is very linear. You get your initiative order and you go in order. And so if you can kill somebody before their initiative comes up, you will prevent them from taking an action in that combat round. Or prevent their action in the next combat round. You will prevent that from happening. But if you picture combat as being simultaneous, which is something else I've been experimenting with a little bit, then when exactly does the spell take effect? That becomes the question. Now, most of the comments here talk about it in a very linear way. Let's see here. We only got 3 comments. So at the beginning of the fight, you cast something that has a 1-round duration. It's going to end at the beginning of your next turn, so round 2. If you cast something that has a 1-minute duration, it's going to end at the beginning of your turn on round 11. And the basic idea of this is you activated it at the beginning of your turn, or on your turn. And so 1 round takes you back around to the beginning of your turn. And 2 rounds would be the beginning. The end of the 2nd round would be the beginning of your 3rd turn. Therefore, the end of the 10th round would be the beginning of your 11th turn. And this is all well and good in a general sense, but what if you move and then cast the spell? And you're doing the spell halfway through your turn. So it's actually taking effect not at the beginning of your turn, but halfway through it. Do we go until you complete the first action on your 11th turn? Now the next comment here, we got what? If something lasts 1 minute, it lasts 10 rounds. That's it. There's no partial round. It's active on the first turn you cast it on and the other 9 that follows. Now this is going back to the original post saying, do you count the partial round that it is activated on or not? Okay, says there is no partial round, but that all depends on how you define a round. Usually a round is defined by I start, I take my turn. If it lasts for 1 round, then it's going to go until the start of my next turn, like I said. But if there are 6 people in the round and you are the 4th one to act, then it didn't take effect in the first half of that round. You count the round as the beginning of the initiative order to the end of the initiative order. And so again, we have different ways of calculating what a round is. So we have this 3rd one here. I generally have it expire at the start of the player's initiative on the appropriate round. And this is the most common thing when talking about duration of spells or effects. It usually it starts at the initiative of the player activating it and continues until that initiative on the next round. But again, it depends on how you define a round. And also, as I said, what if you cast the spell after you've taken your movement? Say you take a bonus action, then you move, then you cast the spell. And what if you took a reaction earlier in the round? Say you were the 3rd person to act in the round, but you had your reaction at the time the 2nd person acted. See, there's all these kind of hazy areas, hazy gray areas. Most people think of combat as being very linear, and it is set up very linear. But at the same time, it is not linear, and even in the books is generally described as things are all happening at the same time. And so you get these kind of philosophical questions. When did it take effect? When will it end? When does the round actually start? What are we going to define as a combat round? How does all this work? So you see, this is not as straightforward a question as some people think. People, especially in 5th edition, I've been noticing, this is one thing I do want to mention, and then we'll close this video out. In the modern day, people are so focused on the rules. They say, this is the way it is written, this is the way it has to be. Frequently people will suggest, oh, what if I did this? What if I did this differently? And they'll say, oh, what problem are you trying to solve? And I don't need to be solving the problem, but we'll get into that later. It's just, they look at it and say, this is the way it works, and they can't conceptualize anything else. So combat is very linear. And in some ways that has to be. You can't really do everything at the same time. I think there are ways you could simulate things happening simultaneously better, but you can't actually do it at the same time. Therefore, there will always be somewhat of a linear component to combat. Anything going on in Dungeons & Dragons. Every game has a linear component because you have to take turns. But because of this linear nature, a lot of people get their minds locked into the linear part of it and are unable to conceptualize the more simultaneous portions of it. And I think that's what this is getting at. And I'll actually be honest. I think there are ways that you could more accurately simulate things happening simultaneously. And if you did, you would definitely have to consider more thoroughly what it means for the duration to last for 10 rounds. But I think people who simply dismiss this and say, oh, well, this is the way it works, they limit their thinking. They're saying this is the way it works, don't think about it any other way. Well, I think the original question here actually has some good points to it. Even if we're thinking of it linearly, if a round is 6 seconds long, and I cast my spell on the 5th second of the round, and it's supposed to last 1 minute, then wouldn't it end on the 5th second of round 10 or round 11, whatever? Yet the way it is, most people have it end basically on the 1st second. I'm not going to get too much into the philosophicalness of simultaneous actions and everything, but can you see what I'm saying? Is that saying it works this way just because it's the way the rules make it work is very different than conceptualizing it in your mind and thinking about how this is actually playing out. So I think the question being asked here is a very good question because it tries to conceptualize in the mind what is actually happening. Well, all the responses are just saying, this is the game, this is how the game rules set it out. This is the mechanics that we need to follow. And they don't conceptualize what is actually happening. But I'm going to leave that here. Just leave it with those two stories. If you enjoy this idea of reading off of Reddit and just making some comments, let me know. I'm going to do several of them over the next week or so. I am still doing some comparison videos. I'm hoping to have one drop next week. I will be doing a comparison of the Barbarian between 3rd and 5th edition. I'm also working on a few more short videos on some of the basic mechanics. I'm also still working on getting out a couple more encounters. I did post the Green Dragon, and right now I'm working on a mummy encounter. Those ones are a little bit tougher to edit, and they're not really hard to edit. It's just they're so long, like a 2-hour video. It takes a long time to edit through them. We'll see what's coming up, but I will continue doing my Reddit readings, and let me know, anybody who's watching these, let me know if you enjoy. Please like, subscribe, all that good stuff.